I'm Andrea with Happy Cloud Creations. Oh my goodness. Okay. Just a second. All right. I'm just trying to get everything set up. I don't know why they give you all these prompts after you start the live. You have to do all these clicking of things. All right. I'm Andrea with Happy Cloud Creations. And I'm jumping on because it's the last week of the Prismatic Party Quilt Along. I hope you guys enjoyed this quilt along. Hello, Linda. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that's joined. I've had a lot of fun seeing your guys' quilts progress, all the blocks. There's several people over in the Quilt Along group that have already finished their tops. So if you're over on Instagram, I know there's a few people over on Instagram that have been posting, but a lot of people have been posting over in the Facebook Quilt Along group. Good morning, Sue. Good. Some people are joining me today. If you're an experienced quilter, a lot of this isn't, you don't need this information, but I'm glad you're jumping on to say hi. But if you're new and you have any questions, or if you're experienced and have any questions about finishing your quilt, please let me know. I'll kind of go over finishing this one. So with each size of this quilt, your sashing is going to be a different size. It's going to be based on what your smallest size piece was in there. Betty, I got my pattern yesterday, getting excited to make it. Yay, Betty! There's probably all this inspiration now that all these other people have finished their quilts, huh? So in the instructions, I tell you to sew all your sashing strips together at the ends. You can do it on a diagonal, but it's not as necessary as when you're sewing binding strips together on the diagonal. Since this is going to be laying flat in your quilt, I just do it on the ends. But first you want to make sure to cut off that selvage edge. What I mean by that is the ends of your fabric are a little more tightly woven and they have the little holes in it. So just cut up to there and then sew your strips together. I don't know if you can see those holes. And then you're going to want to sew those together so it's a long continuous strip. I find that you have to cut less strips this way than if you were to just like do 2 strips per section, you know. Like the baby one, I only had to cut 4 or 5 strips. So I was able to get these 2 smaller pieces out of 1 strip and one of the 16-inch strips out of the 1 strip. And then I got the second one out of this one, and I attached the remainder of that one to one of these longer strips. So I finished mine. Yay! I figure it works out better that way if you're cutting them out from a long continuous strip, then you're not having a bunch of short little wasted pieces of fabric, and you can just continue to use that length of fabric. Hi, Amy. I love this Quilt Along, beautiful quilts. Yay, I'm so glad you liked it, Amy. Amy was one of the testers. She made a gorgeous quilt, and then she decided to join the Quilt Along too, which is awesome. So let's see. So first, you're going to want to work your way out. You do your center block, add the sashing. I always recommend to do your side strips first, press it, and then measure what it came out to be before cutting these top and bottom strips. Sometimes your block might have ended up just a tiny bit bigger than it needed to be, and if you cut your strips too short, then it's like, oh no, I cut my 2 strips too short. But if you're able to wait and measure, then you can cut them out the perfect length. And then when you go to attach these block 2s to that center block, you're going to want to make sure this center block with the sashing is the same width and height as the width of those block 2s. And if it's slightly bigger, that's what's nice about the sashing. You can trim it down slightly and nobody will even know that was a little too big, you know. And that's kind of why I like the sashing in this quilt, because it can kind of help you line up your blocks better, and make it go together nicely. Trisha said she really enjoyed this. Yay, I'm so glad. Sometimes I don't know, I worry. I just hope people are having fun making the quilt. Does anybody have any questions about assembling their top? Once you assemble these, you're going to add your sashing strips again, sides first, and then press, and then tops and bottoms, and then you're going to add those last 4 strips of blocks. And when you made these blocks, these two, the seams should have been pressed in alternating directions so that you could nest these and make them go together correctly. These, I think, one way nests good and then the other way didn't nest good. So what I did was I just kind of, maybe it was on this side. When it doesn't nest good, I just kind of flip it the way I want it to go, and then I kind of just force it to nest, if that makes sense. So yeah, once we got our top together, we get to go to the finishing instructions. And of course, you can finish your quilt however you'd like. Send it to a long armor. You can hand tie your quilt. You can machine quilt your quilt. You can hand quilt your quilts. Are all the videos on YouTube for making this quilt? Yes, Betty. After I filmed the Facebook and Instagram lives, I uploaded the Facebook version to my YouTube channel for easy access, because there's some people that just have joined my email list and they are just doing the quilts along through the email list. So I wanted to have a place that wasn't on social media that people could access it. So yes, all these videos will be saved to my YouTube in a playlist so that it's easy access to get to all the videos. So if you are sending your quilt to a long armor, I have never done that, so I wasn't sure how much overhang you needed. I typically recommend 3-inch overhang, but someone had told me that they were a long armor and they require 4-inch overhang, which would mean 4 inches all the way around your quilt. So that would need to be 8 inches larger than your top. So make sure to call your long armor and see how big your backing and how big your batting is. That's what I mean by overhang. So I did the 48 by 48, the baby size, and I was trying to explain to my mom yesterday, but I don't know if I did it very well. The instructions, let's see, how much does it tell you? So it says 3 yards, and that's if you are just gonna sew the 2 sections together and you're gonna have a lot of excess fabric. If you don't want a lot of excess fabric, I will take a 2-yard piece of fabric. You might want to go 2 1/4 if you're kind of worried about not having enough fabric. So this would be my 2 yards of fabric, which is 72 inches. And then I cut 2 10-inch strips off the bottom, 2 10-inch by width of fabric strips. And then I'll actually just sew those 2 strips together on the ends and then bring them up here and sew them to the side of that piece. So this is 44 by 52 inches, and I'll sew that 10-inch strip to the side. Oh, this side. I'm backwards. My page is backwards back here. Sew it to the side, and that'll give you a 54 by 52 inch backing piece. And I find that is large enough for me, just using my domestic machine with cotton batting. I know if you use polyester, when I used to use polyester, I felt like the top would squitch out more than with cotton for some reason. Cotton's so much lower loft that it doesn't shift as much, at least for me. So does that make sense? You're going to cut some strips off the bottom, sew those 2 strips together, and then attach it to the side. So you got a 54 by 52 inch piece. And then you only have to buy 2 yards of fabric, which is nice. That's what I do for that. For larger quilts, I I will either buy like a solid Kona cotton, something that matches the front of the quilt. Like for this one, I used the Jamaica, which is in the front of the quilt. For this one that we've used a ton, this is my husband's Tetris quilt that I made him. I've washed this a lot, and it's still held up really nicely. The Target sheet, it's 100% cotton. I have another one here. Let me show you. So it's 100% cotton, ultra soft flat sheet. Why I like it is all you have to do is buy one flat sheet. You're not buying a whole set, because I tend to, when I buy a set, I end up not using the fitted sheet for quilts for some reason. It ends up being too small. So I like using this because sometimes you can get them on sale for like $10, and that's really cheap for a backing fabric. Let's see, I'm trying to see, it is, trying to find the thread count. So thread count is 300 on this. I'm going to go more than 300 on a thread count for a sheet because you'll wear down your needle faster, I've heard. So I stay between 200 to 300 thread count if I'm using a sheet as a backing fabric. I know a lot of people like to use antique sheets because you can find beautiful floral ones. So that's a good tip if you're like, backing fabric, that's a lot of backing fabric, and you don't want to spend that much money on backing fabric. A sheet is a great way to go. So after you have your, batting. So you're going to make sure to have batting. My go-to is Warm and White, Warm and Plush. I used to use Warm and Natural a lot. I wanted to show you the differences. They're not sponsored. That's the brand I have locally, and I can find online easily. So this is the Warm and Natural. If you can see, it has brown specks in it. I don't know if you can see that. So this is the Warm and White. So it's a lot whiter. So if you're using a white fabric or light colored fabrics, Warm and White is nice. The Warm and Plush is slightly thicker than both of them. But it's like a cream color. So if you are using white fabrics, the cream may show through a little bit, especially if you're using a white colored fabric. But I just wanted to show you the differences. It doesn't have the brown spots as much. It has a little bit, but the Warm and Natural has a lot on just the back side. So the front doesn't have a lot of brown spots. So if I would just I'll show you. The front is more of just cream. There are little bits of brown spots, but most of the brown spots are just on the back. So what I typically do is place the brown spotted one toward the back of the quilt, because I feel like backs of quilts don't usually get seen as much as fronts of quilts, right? Yeah, I love Warm and Natural. I started using the Warm and Plush just because it's a little thicker, and I wanted something. Oh, it's all in the air now. I wanted something a little bit thicker, so I had been using the Warm and Plush a lot more lately. Has anyone done their own quilting with minking backing? Sue asked. I haven't yet. Has anyone? I know Emily Dennis, Quilty Love. If you're on Instagram, Sue, she has been doing a lot of her quilts and minky backing, but I think she may be getting those long-armed. I did a long time ago. A customer requested a quilt, and there was minky backing. I did very minimal quilting on that quilt. It was probably 4-inch lines apart, up and down the quilt, and I just pinned it heavily because I was worried about it shifting. But it makes a really cozy quilt. I have been thinking about the next one I do for my daughter. I want to back it in minky. Same with my son. I want to have them have like a cozy couch quilt. Let me know if you do end up doing it yourself, Sue. I'd like to know how it turns out and how you quilted it, because I want to do that for the next one for them. Okay, so batting. You can use any brand of battings, though. Those are just the ones I like because I can find them on Amazon. I can find them at my local Joann's. Joann's usually just has the Warm and Natural. It used to have Warm and Plush at mine, but lately it has not been having the Warm and Plush. So next up, you're gonna quilt your quilt. If you look at the blog post for this week, I do give lots of links to tutorials to people that know what they're doing, like Emily Dennis of Quilty Love and Susie Williams from Susie Quilts. I think there's even one from Cluck Cluck Sew in there. But they have great tutorials on, or Martinly Morgan too. Not Martinly Morgan, Morgan Handmade. She does a tabletop basting video, and Emily Dennis does a spray basting video. I just don't have videos of those. So if you are interested in tabletop basting or spray basting your quilts, there's a link to those videos in my blog post for this week. And you can find that. There's a link in the top of this video that sends you to all the different weeks of the Quilt Along. So what I prefer when basting, I like to use basting spray. Lately, I've been using the 505. I had been using the June Taylor, but it got overly sticky, and it just was not the same formula as they used to use years ago. So I switched to the 505, and I've been liking this. I've been using this and then putting a little bit extra safety pins around the edge. I forgot to grab my curved safety pins, but you can get long safety pins that are about this long, and they're curved, and that is easy to pin baste with. You just want to make sure they're at least like hand width apart, your pins, so that you have enough pins in there. Oh, I was going to grab I have one quilt that's hand tied, my very first quilt I made. It's hand tied. I didn't use like thread though. I used yarn to hand tie it. I made it when I was 12. So that's a really, if you're beginner, hand tying your quilts. There's a tutorial. Susie Quilts does hand tying a quilt. There's a link to that in the blog. All right, so basting, I like to use spray baste. If you have allergies, probably not a good idea. You can pin baste. You can thread baste, or you can just send it to a long armor. I'm kind of looking forward to sending if I make a king size, I'm thinking about sending it to a long armor. Just got to find the right long armor. Okay, so once your quilt is basted, you get to quilt it. You can free motion quilt it. Like I said, you can hand tie it. You can hand quilt it. I have not hand quilted. I have not free motioned. What I typically do is straight line quilting, and I use my walking foot, which helps pull the fabric from the bottom and the top. It has these little feed dogs that helps pull the top at the same time the bottom's being pulled, which makes it a lot easier to quilt. I got this a few years ago. I went on the Janome website to see which one I needed for my machine, and then I found this on Amazon. Sometimes you can get a generic one, or if you have a Singer, it's probably easy to find one. But you got to make sure you get the right one. Mine's a low shank machine. There's low shank and there's high shank. So you got to make sure you have the right one for your machine. But a lot of times I will just take this and I will line the edge of my foot up, which is almost a 1/4 inch, maybe a little more than a 1/4 inch, away from the seams on my quilt to give it a straight line quilting effect, which I guess I didn't grab any quilts like that. Or like with this one, I wanted to show examples of the different ways I like to quilt. I will just outline the design. I'll take my foot and I'll just outline the design of the quilt, and it gives it good texture, and it kind of pops out the design a little more. This is one of my favorite ways to quilt. It is a little more time consuming than just from your straight up and down quilting. So a lot of times I'll do just a straight up and down quilting from top to bottom. And with this one, I've showed this before. This is my husband's Tetris quilt. And I just did top to bottom straight line quilting, but I did the zigzag stitch. So instead of doing it in between the blocks, I just, I guess I did it in between, and then I did it on the seams. So I did it on the seams, and then I took my little guide and measured it so they would all be the same, going down the center, on the seams, center, on the seam, center, and then it gives it a lot of good texture. This one is a daily user on the couch. And then I think I was like running late today because I was like, oh wow, usually I give myself an hour after the kids leave to come jump on and do this video, but I only gave myself half hour. For my original quilt, I went top to bottom, basically. Let's see if I have a ruler. So this is the large throw, 72 by 72. And my batting, I think, is like 6 or 10 inches apart. You can quilt it. So my quilting lines are about 3 inches apart. So this piece is 3 inches. So I did it down the center, then I marked 3 inches away from that and did it down the center. Gave it kind of like a checker effect. So top to bottom, and then I did side to side, which for this size quilt wasn't too difficult on my domestic machine. My throat's like this big on my machine. It's not super big. I just like to, I roll my quilt up and then do half of it, unrolling it, and then I'll roll it up and then do the other half the other way. It makes it a little easier to get through the machine. And then this one I recently did was my Butterfly Mint Blooms. I wanted to give it a little bit more flowy, even though it's just straight line quilting with my walking foot. I kind of just did a wavy line, free wavy line with my straight line quilting foot. You can probably see it better on the back. This, I don't think I've washed this one yet. I like to wait to wash it until I'm ready to get rid of it. I almost gave this one to my daughter, but I don't know. I'm thinking about making her a big one because this is just 48 by 48. But I like the wavy line. It kind of gives it a little bit of flow, a little different elements. Quilting can give your quilt a different design element. I typically will go with the lightest color in the quilt. So like this one I did white, but then this one I did yellow. But most of the time I do white. Does anybody have questions about quilting? So Sue said she had Minky, but she had it long-armed. Yeah, so let me know if you do on your domestic machine, how difficult it is. Because I had been planning on doing like a throw size for cloud and for snow. I have a couple up count and mean patterns that I wanted to do for them. Let me know how it goes. So once your quilt is quilted, we got to add this binding, which is basically something to seal off all those raw edges. I put a couple links to tutorials in my blog post. Emily Dennis, am I pronouncing her last name right? I don't know. Quilty Love. She does a machine binding tutorial, which I've never done a machine binding, which basically I think you sew it to the back of your quilt and then you'll wrap it around to the front and then sew it down with your machine. I like to cut 2.5 inch strips. Some people do smaller, some people do larger. I think probably more people do smaller. So you'll take your 2.5 inch strips. I kind of just line them up. You can draw a line from one corner to one corner, or you can just eyeball it and sew a line. And then once that's sewed, it just folds up and it becomes a binding strip. And then once you have that strip, you fold it in half and press it, and you're going to be lining this raw edge up with the raw edge of your quilt, and then you can wrap that around. So you have 2 layers of fabric going over your quilt edge. I know when I first started quilting, I was only doing a single layer of fabric going over my quilt edge, and a lot of those quilts, the binding wore away a lot faster, I noticed, than these. The 2 layers of fabric don't wear away as fast. It gives it just a little extra thickness. But I really like how Susie Quilts joins her 2 ends, because when you start and then you get to the end, I like how she joins her ends on the binding. I'm a little scared to try Minky. Lately have pearl cotton for big stitch quilting. Yeah, I'm like kind of scared about Minky, but I wonder if you spray basted it and lightly pinned it. And then, yeah, I did big quilting lines. Has anybody in the group or on Instagram done it? April, I personally like sewing to the front and then stitch in the ditch after the glue base is down so it gets caught in the binding on the back. Oh, so you machine bind it. April said she sews hers to the front, flips it over to the back, and she'll sew from the front to the back. So you kind of won't see it because you know where you're stitching, and then it just catches the back of the fabric. Mary says she does all of her binding by machine, so it's much easier. I should try it again. Last time I tried it was years ago, and I was in a rush. I was like, I had an hour, and I was like going to go see my friend or cousin to give her a quilt, and I did it very quickly, and it didn't turn out as nice as hand binding, but I think if I had more time to actually finish it, it probably would have turned out nicer. I should try it again. I should. Instead of trying something once and then like giving up on it, right? So once your quilt is bound, you can wash it and cuddle in it. I do, if I don't pre-wash my fabric, I like to throw a couple Shout color catchers in the wash. I wash it cold, delicate cycle with a like 3, depending, like this was very colorful, so I threw like 3 color catchers in here, and they turned out to be like a light blue color, lighter than this, but it was probably from this dark blue. That's probably what it came from. But I like to do that to catch any dyes, just so these dyes don't land on different parts of your quilt. Especially, like, so this one has that dark navy, and then it has white. So I'm going to throw probably, like, 3 color catchers in this one, too, just to make sure. Because I don't like to pre-wash my fabrics, because I like that crinkle look. Your quilt gets a lot more crinkly. Amy says, I sew to the back, flip to the front, and use a walking foot with a stitch in the ditch attachment. Oh, that's cool. Betty says, I do all my binding by hand. Machine binding never line up for me. Yeah, the time I did it, and I think I did it on a pot holder too, and I had planned on selling those pot holders, but then I just kept them for myself because I didn't like how the binding turned out. It's not perfect, but is done better than perfect. Yes, April, I agree. Done is better than perfect, right? Especially if it's just like a quilt you're going to keep for yourself or give to a baby or something, or a friend. They're not going to be like inspecting and going, is this perfect? But getting it done, is nice. Not having a stack of quilt tops. I'm doing better this year. I just have this quilt top, and I still have a butterfly in blooms. It's a throw size. I need to finish that. But maybe after I finish this one, I'll quilt that one. Maybe I need a walking foot. Yeah, Betty, I would recommend trying to get a walking foot. You can get generic ones on Amazon too, or at Joann Fabrics, or your local quilt shop. Got dust in mine. Yeah, so does anybody have any questions? A lot of people already have their methods for finishing a quilt. I just wanted to kind of give you some of my things. Oh, when I'm hand binding, I like to bind, some people don't even bind down their, or tack, pin or anything with their binding. I like to use like little clips, just hold down in place. I put a couple down while I'm hand binding it. And then I use like a leather thimble, which I found, which I really like. It fits nicely, a lot nicer than plastic ones. So I really like this. I had used this one before, but every time I use this, it would break my thread. Does that happen to you guys? The metal thing? Every time it would break my thread. So I stopped using that. But yeah, I want to thank you again so much for everyone that joined me in this quilt along. It was a lot of fun. I'm not sure when the next quilt along will be. Typically a month before, I think I'll start when I put a poll up in the Facebook quilt along group to see what everybody wants to make with their next quilt, with the next quilt along. So I'm not sure. Typically, I don't do a quilt along during the summer, but we'll see. If I start it like before the summer, maybe. But typically, I don't like to, just because the kids are home and it doesn't leave a lot of time for sewing. We're usually busy playing outside and doing stuff with family. So the next quilt along might not be till September. I'll let you guys know in the Facebook quilt along group, and then I'll send a poll. I'll put a poll up. If you struggle, switch to a flange binding. It's the easiest and best way to get mine to look professional. Ooh, I've never done a flange binding. I'll have to look into that. Well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to tell you guys. Oh, all my patterns in my shop are 15% off until April 5th. Just like as a thank you for joining the Quilt Along. If there was a different pattern you saw and you wanted to try out, they're all 15% off through April 5th, which I think that's next Tuesday. Yeah. And I guess that's it. I hope you guys have a great day. I can't wait to see your quilt tops. Make sure to post a picture on Instagram or in the Facebook Quilt Along group. Everybody is enjoying seeing everybody's quilt along. Not just me. I think everybody else likes seeing the quilt tops too. It was a lot of fun quilting with you guys, and I hope you guys have a great day. And hopefully it's sunny where you guys are. Bye.